group. This is an international group of friends that gather on Fridays internationally to fast. Some people water fast, some dry fast, some eat fruits. It's whatever that is for you. If you're interested in becoming a part of this community, we welcome you. Go to our YouTube channel, the Weekly Fasting Group, and directions are just below that. Our moderator, who couldn't be here today, is Eric Rosini. His WhatsApp number is there. And we are a WhatsApp weekly fasting group where we share tips, support each other in our practice, and grow together. Today, we are honored and excited to have the incredible Loren Lockman with us from Costa Rica. He is the owner and founder of the Tanglewood Wellness Center, where he has helped thousands of people heal their bodies, or helped their bodies heal, I should say, through water fasting and learning the proper, the most beneficial, I would say, and the optimal way of eating, refeeding. And he's going to talk to us today about his lovely journey, as well as this topic that I'm super excited to learn more about: 8 hours fasting, 8 hours to 8 months, and what happens, and creating our perfect health. So welcome, Loren. Thank you so much for adding us to your ever so busy schedule. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can tell us a little bit about your journey, what this 8 hours to 8 months is. And then we have loads of questions. The community has sent me loads of questions for you. So thank you again for being so gracious with your time.
It's a pleasure to be here. And as far as the questions is concerned, I just need to let you know I've got a flight I've got to get on next Thursday. So I only have until then. All right. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think my journey is all that interesting or exciting, but I'll share it with you just as a point of perspective. And I think because my understanding is there's a limited amount of time before Q&A, I really want to spend most of the time talking about the 8 hours to 8 months. Okay, so let's see. 1984, I graduated from school a little late. I was 23. Within about 6 months, I found myself very ill. And at the time, I grew up, and at that time was living in Washington, D.C., in that area, very conservative in terms of health. All I knew growing up was conventional allopathic medicine. And so I went to my conventional doctor and was told that most of what I was talking about didn't exist, that there were no real problems. It was in my head. There were a couple of things that were diagnosed, including 57 allergies and chronic sinus infection. But later on, I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, and systemic candida. And back then, and again, we're talking about nearly 40 years ago, most doctors would have said those things aren't real. They don't exist. Even today, some of them say that. But back then, that was the common perspective. And so after 3 years and 3 different doctors, I gave each of them a year and then gave up on them and moved on. And each of them told me the same thing. And I was getting worse, not better, all the time. After 3 years, I thought to myself, okay, medicine's not helping. I finally realized that medicine's strictly about suppressing symptoms. It has nothing to do with health. It's really disease care. And in most cases, it's about suppressing symptoms in a way that makes people feel better, but at the actual cost of their health. Okay. And again, this is a point that many people may not realize, even here in this group, but symptoms are nothing more than evidence that the body's cleansing and healing. Okay. And so suppressing symptoms is never actually useful. Now, there may be times where your life may depend on suppressing symptoms. I guess that's useful. If you have a life-threatening infection, you might want to take antibiotics. But I was given many courses of broad-spectrum antibiotics because of the sinus infection. And what they do is they depress your body's immune function. And so I was getting sicker all the time because of the drugs. Okay, because of the drugs. according to Johns Hopkins University in the United States, a very well-respected school, a iatrogenic disease, which is the mistakes of doctors in medicine, is a third leading cause of death. Now, I know many people would say, oh, no, it's number one. It's not the third cause, it's the number one cause, okay? And so dealing with symptoms this way is actually quite serious, right? People think they're okay because they don't have any more symptoms, but they're not. They're actually making the body more toxic. So I finally realized this. I woke up, I walked away from medicine, and I didn't really know where to turn. I looked at nutrition. I had begun studying nutrition nearly 10 years earlier at the age of 14. And having grown 10 inches in a year without gaining an ounce, and thought maybe I need to take a look at what I'm eating and work on building some muscle. And so I began studying nutrition. I thought maybe I need to go back to nutrition. Well, conventional nutrition, according to everything I looked at, everything I understood and had researched, I was doing everything I should have been doing. And here I was, sicker than anybody I knew at that point. And so I started thinking, okay, well, maybe nutrition's not all it's cracked up to be. I wound up, I had this novel idea that if 25 million other species, that's all of them, all the other animal species, each has a natural species-specific diet for which its digestive tract is specifically adapted, maybe we do too. And I started thinking about what that looked like, and I started making changes. Within 6 months of taking responsibility for my own health, I was so much healthier that people started coming to me saying, oh my God, you look amazing. What did you do? Can you help me? Can you help my spouse? Can you help my kid or my parents? And I began doing everything I could to help as many people as possible. Around the same time, I was open at this point, looking for answers. I was completely committed to my health and really, truly willing to do anything I needed to do in order to get my health back because I'd lost it. And so I came across a book called Rational Fasting that you're very likely familiar with by Professor Arnold Ehret. This book was written not quite 100 years ago, 1929, if I'm not mistaken. And he talked about people going weeks without food. And while it sounded a bit crazy to me, it also made some sense. And so I decided I would try fasting. And I'd actually grown up with some experience with fasting. I'm Jewish, but only on my parents' side. It's a bit of a joke, both parents. So we grew up fasting one day a year for Yom Kippur. And I knew I'd done that many times through childhood every year. I knew I could go one day without food or water. I didn't know whether I could go 2 days. And so I tried 2 days and parked myself close to the refrigerator just in case. I survived 2 days and tried 4, and then 8, and then 16. And I kept working my way up until I was fasting for weeks at a time. And amazing things began to shift for me. And so flash forward several more years, I came to find out, I didn't realize that there were places in the world, even in the United States back then, there were probably half a dozen places operating then where one could go and have a water-only fast. And when I talk about fasting, I'm talking about water-only fasting. First of all, the definition of fasting is the complete abstinence from calories or nutrients, right? So I heard you saying earlier, it could be fruit, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, everyone can call it whatever they want to, but drinking juices or eating fruit technically isn't fasting because you could live on those things forever. In fact, I did a lot of juice feasting before I learned about water-only fasting. My last one was 120 days. And then I did a week on water, and I couldn't believe how much more powerful it was for me. Okay. And I never look back, and, I don't, today may not be the right time because there's so much to talk about. But I no longer recommend drinking juices for various reasons. I believe that whole foods are infinitely healthier for us, and that a lot of the things, the benefits people ascribe to juices occur for them because what they're doing is they're consuming something better or easier to digest than what they had been consuming before. So if you go from a standard American diet to a diet of only fresh juices, of course you're going to get healthier. That doesn't necessarily mean you found the best thing for you. But I realized that there were places you could go, and I started to look at them and what they had to offer. I realized that they were, in my opinion, far from ideal. They all seemed very clinical. They were still largely employing medical ideas, philosophy from conventional medicine, about suppressing symptoms. They were using distilled water, which I don't think is a good idea because it's completely unnatural. I know there are people out there that will tell you that your urine, the water in fruits, and rain is all distilled water, but the truth is that none of it is. In experiment after experiment, rain always contains something besides water, and that's because water doesn't precipitate out of the air until it encounters a solid object. So in the sky, that's going to be dust or pollen or pollutants or minerals. And so rainwater is not distilled water. Rainwater, in fact, as a certified permaculture instructor, rainwater should be purified before you drink it because it can contain all kinds of things you don't want to consume. Where distilled water means it's only water, nothing else. And so, for that reason, I thought it's possible to create something much better. And that was the impetus to create Tanglewood, because I had seen the incredible benefits for myself. I skipped a piece, when I mentioned that people had come to me and started asking me to help them. About 5 years later, I gave up my full-time job, my own business. I closed a real estate company that I ran to be a full-time health coach. Not because it was more lucrative, it was a lot less lucrative, but because it felt much more important. It felt like I was doing something important to people. And I think everybody wants to help. And I'd found something that I was really passionate about, was helping people with their health. And so I became a full-time health coach. Well, the people I was coaching knew that I was fasting myself. I mean, for about 8 years, I fasted a lot, way more than I probably should have, but I was learning through my own mistakes. And so they started asking me to guide them through fasts. And I was very resistant at first, but eventually decided that I had enough experience at that point, having at that point already fasted nearly 40 times before I took my first client. And I'm talking about for weeks. I decided that I would take people that weren't very sick and only for about 10 days maximum. That grew over time. Today, over the last 27 and a half years, I've guided more than 10,000 people through fasts, averaging 26 days. And again, this is 26 days of only water. Now, you mentioned dry fasting, and that's another subject, and we can get into that if you want to ask questions about it. But suffice to say that animals in nature who have always eaten their natural diet start out fully hydrated. We at Tanglewood, over the last 18 years, we've measured the hydration levels of more than 6,000. Virtually everybody is severely dehydrated. The most dehydrated people we see are the ones who've had a dry fasting practice. And before coming to us, they've done some dry fasting. They're usually the most dehydrated people we see. One example, a guy who'd done a lot of fasting, including a lot of dry fasting, was 34 years old, but was as dehydrated as the average 75-year-old. Okay, and let me explain that comment, because most people dehydrate themselves by making conventional choices. So I'll use the example I've used. Alva, you've probably heard this before because I've shared this many times before. But I'm guessing most people here have eaten corn chips at some point, right? Corn chips are pretty dry when they go in. It turns out they're 3% water. Are they that dry when they come out? You better hope not. Okay, that's going to be pretty uncomfortable. They come out of your body roughly 75% water. That's what stool is, 75% water on average. So they're going in 3%, they're coming out 75. Where's the water coming from? It's coming from your body. When we eat foods that are relatively dry, okay, we're losing water from the body in order to pass this stuff through the system. Okay, we're meant to eat things that are high in water and relatively high in fiber. Every species on the planet in nature eats a high water content diet. Okay, if you've got a dog or a cat and you're feeding it dry kibble, stop doing that. You're killing your animal. In the same way people are killing themselves by dehydrating themselves. Okay. This was, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but 19 years ago, I'd already been telling people for 10 or 12 years to eat high water content diets, to avoid dehydrated food as much as possible. I moved to Central America. A woman I knew was moving out of the country, had a cat she needed to find a home for. We had a problem with rodents, and I thought, okay, we'll take the cat, that'll solve the issue. And she said to me, give it half a can of wet food and a big bowl of dry kibble every day. And so I did that. And after about a month, I thought, this cat, which was a white cat with black spots, its fur is yellow, not white, and it feels like straw. And I thought, the poor cat is probably completely dehydrated because it's eating dry food, something no one should do. And so I threw away the rest of the dry food, started feeding it only wet food. Within a month, its fur was completely snow white and as soft as could be, completely changed in 1 month. Okay. And so, those people, if you're using dehydrators and eating dehydrated foods, that should be something you do very, very occasionally, if at all. And to be honest with you, probably not at all until you get yourself to a reasonably high level of hydration. Because when your body's functioning very well, it can recover from little bumps in the road relatively easily. But if you're dehydrated the way most people are, and you're trying to get to that point, that can derail you almost completely. Okay, so it's probably better something that people really are as resistant to as possible for the time being. Okay, and so 8 months, 8 hours to 8 months. When we talk about intermittent fasting, I think this group is largely about intermittent fasting, right?
Yes, and more. Some people do
More.
extended water
Okay.
fast and stuff
Okay.
like that.
Okay, great. So many people here will understand more of what I'm talking about, but even for those people who think that fasting for 16 hours is the be all and all, or even 8 hours. I mean, I was shocked about 3.5 years ago, just before the pandemic started. I was on a plane flying from Stockholm, Sweden, where I just done a series of live events, flying back across the pond to North America, and I saw a CNN clip where they were talking about this new intermittent fasting scheme that people were finding so valuable, and it was 12-12. And I thought, who finds 12 hours fasting so beneficial? And it occurred to me, I remembered a client I'd had many years before who, when I first spoke with her on the phone, on a Skype call back then, now it's all Zoom calls, I said to her, how many meals per day do you eat? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, what do you mean? What do I mean? How many meals do you eat every day? And she said, well, do you mean during the day or at night too? I said, okay. In every 24-hour period, how many times do you eat? She said 12. Wake up every 2 hours with an alarm to eat something. Now, she was trying to gain weight and thought that eating all the time would be the best way. It's a terrible way to do this because your body needs to rest. Okay. But, there may be people out there who think that fasting 8 hours a day is a great thing. And you know what? For this woman, if she had just gone from not fasting at all, from literally engaging her digestive tract 24 hours a day, because she was eating every 2 hours, and most of the stuff she was eating, she wasn't done digesting, right, by the time she ate another meal. So her digestive tract never got any rest. If she had gone from that to fasting for 8 hours a day, she would have seen benefits. And it's not because fasting 8 hours a day is incredibly powerful. It's not. It's because nobody should be eating all the time. Okay? It's because the digestive tract should be resting as much as possible.
Sorry, Loren. Could anyone and everyone that's not speaking, that's not Loren, mute yourselves? We've got some background noise.
If you're coughing, please mute yourself.
Yeah, please get some water and mute yourself.
Nice. You need some water. Absolutely. Okay.
Bridget, maybe if you can mute that person, that would be great.
Okay.
Sorry, Loren.
That's okay. That's okay. So I think an important starting place is this. If you're intermittent fasting, or maybe interested in intermittent fasting and just getting started, I think what you need to understand is that there's no magic to not eating for 16 hours a day. The important point to understand is that our bodies should be processing food no more often than necessary. Okay, no more often than necessary. Okay, the one thing that longevity experts agree on is that eating as little as we need to survive, that's the only thing they agree on in terms of extending our lifespan, is that we eat no more calories than necessary. Okay, and I would say that because our digestive tracts want to rest as much as possible, we want to do that not by having a little tiny bit of food every 15 minutes throughout the 24-hour period, but rather sitting down once or twice a day. And I actually believe twice is best for most people, twice a day, and the rest of the day allowing the body the full opportunity to rest the digestive tract as much as possible. Okay, because processing food takes more energy than anything else we do. All right, so that's the 8 hours. Now, most people talk about intermittent fasting are talking about eating within an 8-hour window and fasting for 16. And again, that's fantastic, not because it's magic to not eat for 16 hours, but because we really don't want to eat any more often than we need to. The more time we have to allow the body to rest the digestive tract, the more energy the body has to put into the processes of cleansing and healing. Now, do we do significant cleansing and healing in 16 hours? No, not really. It's a pretty superficial amount of cleansing and healing that we do, but we're much better off doing that than eating all the time, okay? But if we can go from 16 hours to 20 hours, we're going to see more benefit, okay? And so what I've been doing now for over 30 years, most of the time, and I want to add, and it's important, I think, to point out, it's not a strict rule. We don't have to have, be so harsh, it has to be this way. If I go to a farmer's market in the morning and someone says to me, hey, you want to try this organic, whatever amazing thing, I'm going to say, yes, absolutely, even though I normally don't eat until 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon is my first meal of the day most of the time, okay? And that's what happens for me, first meal at 2 to 3 in the afternoon, probably 330 or 35 days. There may be 30 days a year, less than 10%, where I'm eating something earlier than that. But that is not typically the way it is. And you want to understand that it's the consistent choices we make. Okay, so by consistently giving my body 20 hours a day to rest my digestive tract, my body is able to stay incredibly fit on top of the issues, detoxifying as it needs to in real time. So as I encounter whatever I might encounter in real time, the body can deal with it. Whereas if we're processing food all the time, the body can't deal with it, okay? So that's the benefit of intermittent fasting. That's why we see so much benefit from it. Now, I've been posting YouTube videos now for 11 or 12 years. There's more than 1,000 videos on my channel. If you haven't seen it, write down my name and go to YouTube/Loren Lockman. You'll find over 1,000 videos, not all about fasting. Some are about diet, and some are about other subjects related to maximizing our health and vitality. I mean, what I'm all about is helping people maximize their potential. Okay, and I truly believe every single person has genius, but no one can maximize their potential if they're not vibrating at the highest frequency. So we have to take care of our physical health. It doesn't matter, how much of a genius one may be. If they're not vibrating at the highest frequency, they're not going to be accessing the full capacity of their amazing brain. Okay, it's not going to happen. So again, this is really why this is such a critically important piece. But people comment on my YouTube videos and they'll say, oh, no one needs to fast for 21 days. Just don't eat for 16 hours and your body takes care of everything. And it's important to understand that most of the people who come to me have already tried everything else. We're often the last resort because what we do is considered pretty radical by most people. Again, not eating for an average of nearly 4 weeks is considered pretty radical. Let me point out, though, that The biggest benefits that we see, the most amazing stories that we see, and we see these all the time. In every single session, we'll see things that most people would say are miraculous, that shouldn't happen, that aren't supposed to be possible. Now, some of them, I mean, to me, they don't seem miraculous at all because I've seen them over and over again. For instance, nearly 1,000 hypertensive clients who have healed themselves from hypertension. Medicine says you have hypertension, you're going to take medication for the rest of your life. Okay, our clients leave us, and as long as they keep following the program I give them, they never need medication again. Okay, we get their blood pressure down to below normal. And virtually, we so far had one person who did 21 days. And when he completed the process, his blood pressure was still 6 points above normal. But he started out 56 points above normal. That's a pretty significant shift. Okay, we literally, statistically eliminated 100% risk. He started out at being 112% greater risk of heart attack or stroke than the average 75-year-old, which is not a good place to be. It's just waiting for it to happen, to being a 12% greater risk than the average person that age. That's a huge difference. Okay, yeah. Type 2 diabetes. Medicine says can't heal it. We have 100% success with practically 150 clients. Every single person, 100% success. That's what happens. No need for medication. The body's able to manage blood sugar all by itself. This is type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is more difficult, and many people aren't going to be able to get off of insulin completely. Some have. Most are able to reduce it dramatically, which is a huge win just by doing that. Okay. And almost everything else you can think of. Okay. So the longest fast, now I said 8 hours to 8 months. I've never fasted anyone for 8 months. That's a long time. Okay. The longest fast I've supervised was only 4.5 months on only water. 4.5 months, right? Again, most people would say it's impossible. The guy was morbidly obese. He had a lot of reserves, which is what the body lives on when it's fasting, is the fat reserves. That's why we store them, so the body doesn't die in the absence of food. Because in nature, there are floods and droughts and fires, and there are times where it's difficult to get food. Most people probably think that if they skip lunch, they're going to die. But the fact is that the average human body can go 6 to 8 weeks, if done properly, without eating anything, only consuming water. Okay. And people who are, as I like to say, wealthy in nutrient reserves can go much longer. So this guy who was morbidly obese when he started went 4.5 months. He started out with stage 4 testicular cancer. When he was finished, there was no trace of cancer. And we have seen this sort of result over and over again. Now, I want to hasten to add, I'm not suggesting that everybody can heal from anything. There are people with stage 4 cancer who unfortunately are probably not going to survive it, because it's more than their body is able to handle. It's too little, it's gone too far, but we don't know who that is. And so we've had other people with stage 4 cancer heal as well. And the point is, we never know. And so if it's me and a doctor says to me, well, you have no chance, I would say, thank you very much for your opinion. I'm going to go fast because that's the very best thing that I can do. And perhaps it's important to say here something that maybe not everyone realizes, because so we hear so many people talking about how their juices healed their body, or raw food healed their body, or superfoods healed their body, or smoothies healed their body, or supplements. And it's really important to be completely clear about this, that healing and cleansing, detoxification, these are biological processes. And what that means is that only the organism can heal the organism. Okay? Nothing that you take and nothing anyone does to you can heal you. I'm a Reiki master. People say, you're a healer. No, I'm not a healer. I can't heal anyone. Okay? I can put energy into your body, but if your body can't take that energy and do something with it, you're not going to heal. I can't heal you. Only your body can heal itself. Fasting, when done properly, extended water-only fasting, is so powerful because it allows the body the optimal conditions to cleanse and heal. Okay. It's the best way to get out of the body's way. And that's why we see such amazing benefits. Now, perhaps I do need to say something. I wasn't sure whether to go here or not, but I just made a statement that water only fasting is the best way. But isn't dry fasting 4 times more powerful? No, it's not. Again, our experience is dry fasters come in the most dehydrated people on campus. The second most dehydrated people, interestingly, are people eating a perfect diet, an optimal diet, as I see it, high water content fruits and simple green salads, but they're not drinking any water. These people think they're getting enough water from their food, are usually the second most dehydrated people, and worse than people eating conventionally. Okay, because the people eating conventionally at least are drinking something. And these people are kidding themselves into thinking they're getting enough water. They're not. Okay. And so what happens when we get people, and we see half a dozen people here who've had a dry fasting practice, for some reason they decide maybe we'll try this, and they come to us, and they start out super dehydrated. We get them hydrated again. When we do, all the symptoms that had disappeared, which they thought they'd healed, all those symptoms come back. Water is the universal transport medium. And what that means is that we have 5 primary channels of elimination: through the urinary tract, the kidneys, right? Through the colon, through the skin, through the breath from the lungs, and through mucous membranes: eyes, nose, ears, mouth, anus, vagina, penis. These are all mucous membranes. These are ways that the body can move things from inside to outside the body, but only if there's sufficient water. We take the average person who's already seriously dehydrated and we put them on a dry fast. What we do is we make them more dehydrated and their body can't eliminate anything. And what that means is there are no symptoms. Symptoms are evidence. Remember, the body's detoxifying, it's cleansing or healing. When we stop the body from doing that, we feel better. That's what drugs do. Are they good for us? Of course not. Okay. The last thing we want to do is suppress the body's innate ability to cleanse and heal. And that's what happens when we're dry fasting. Okay. Now, animals in nature never, ever say, for the next 5 or 10 days, I'm not going to drink any water. I'm not going to eat. They don't do that. They stop eating because their body tells them to fast. Now, I was giving a full day seminar in Gdansk, Poland a few years ago. And I was talking about this subject, and a man raised his hand. He said, Loren, you're absolutely right about animals and fasting. They all fast when they're sick enough or badly enough injured. He said, but animals, when they need water, they go find it when they're fasting. Humans who say, I'm not drinking anything for the next week, they don't drink any water, okay? Because they've decided they're not listening to their body. Okay, if they're listening to their body, they would know very well their body is begging them for water, okay? And so I don't recommend dry fasting. I think it's misguided and harmful. And of course, everyone's welcome to do what they want. And I don't mean to step on anyone's toes or upset anyone, but my experience is we get dry fasters hydrated, and we find that they've actually accomplished nothing except suppressing symptoms. Everything's still present, okay? And I'll guarantee anybody here who's had a dry fasting practice, come spend 4 weeks with me, and you will leave a new person. Okay, but you're going to have to make follow the recommendations I give you afterwards. I guarantee you in writing, you'll take your health to an entirely new high. Absolutely guaranteed, because it happens every single time. Okay, so now, 4.5 months is as long as I've seen, but the longest fast on record was actually 382 days. And I said 8 months. The truth is, it was more than 13 months. Well, 12 and a half months. But I said 8 months because I thought 8 hours to 8 months, has more of a ring to it than 8 hours to 12 and a half months.
Right.
But the fact is, people have fasted as long as over a year. Okay. Those people had a lot of reserves. And so what we want to understand, and there's more and more evidence all the time for this, more and more people are catching on. I was listening to a podcast, a man was interviewing famous longevity expert, Dr. David Sinclair, and he was saying the first 3 keys to extending your lifespan is A, eat less, something you're probably aware of, I've been teaching for years. Don't eat any more than you need to. B, eat less protein, no more than you need, because the more protein we eat, the faster we age and die. Exact same thing I've been saying for 30 years. And C, fast. Fast to allow your body to heal, because the science is completely clear about this. The 2016 Nobel Prize for Medicine went to Japanese PhD Yoshinori Yasumi for his 25 years work around autophagy. Auto, self, phagy, eat. It's Greek. I'm in Greece right now. It's perfect. Yesterday we were in Pythagoreio, which is a town named for Pythagoras. Pythagoras, the math god, refused to take students until they had fasted for 40 days, because he didn't want to waste his time trying to teach someone who wasn't thinking as clearly as possible. When we fast and get the garbage out of the body, it's not just our physical body, it's every aspect of our health goes to the highest level, including our mental ability as well. Okay, so the world is finally realizing that fasting is the way that we allow our self-healing bodies the very best conditions to heal. And for everybody here, whether you choose to fast for 12 hours or 16 hours, or you want to do something much longer, that's great. Now, I should say here that everybody truly knowledgeable on fasting for the last 100+ years has always said the same thing. You don't want to fast more than about 7 days without having experienced guidance. And the reason why is because you really have to understand the process and everything that's happening to ensure that you're A, doing it correctly so you don't hurt yourself, and B, so that you maximize your benefit. I literally, for years now, at least once a week, it used to be more than that, I hear from people saying, I fasted on my own, I screwed it up, can you help me fix it? I get these messages all the time, okay? So fasting is incredibly powerful, but because it's largely lost to our culture, it's really important that people understand that you need someone to guide you through the process so you actually get all the benefit that you can get from it and don't hurt yourself. And people say, well, but that's a lot of money, it's a big investment. Well, it may be. I mean, it's all relative. For some people, it's nothing at all. And for a lot of people, it's everything. But, it's unfortunate that most people never really value their health until they've lost it. Okay. And you don't want to do that because it's a lot harder to get it back once it's already gone. So I would encourage everyone listening, if you're committed to feeling and functioning as well as possible and to actually manifesting all the genius you're capable of, you need to eliminate decades worth of garbage from your body. There's no other way to do it. Okay? Sure. All right. So I'm not sure where we are. If you want me to keep going, I could go on forever. Or if you'd like to stop and have me take some questions.
Yeah, why don't we weave in some questions? Because you said, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for everything you shared so far. You gave us so many beautiful golden nuggets and pearls of wisdom. And I wanted to speak to two things that you said really quickly. Sure. When you were talking about the dehydration. Most of us that, come from the backgrounds that we do are so dehydrated. I would be one of those people. And for the past 2 years, my body has been saying like, you're dehydrated, but that didn't make sense to me because I drank a lot of water. I drank a lot of juice. And it wasn't until a health crisis hit last January, I was like, okay, message received. The second thing that you said was about having done like the natural or the raw vegan or the fruitarian lifestyle. And I wasn't drinking water. I thought that I could just eat the water and that was enough. Right. And then this year or late last year, my body was like, no, ma'am, I need almost a gallon of water a day, that thing. And I'm still working myself up to that. And that'll come up because I know we have a question about that. People want to know how much water, but I've got a whole bunch of questions. So we'll answer all those that you have time for.
If I could, let me jump in and just respond to something you just said, because I think it's important for people to understand, I made a statement that people dehydrate themselves by eating foods that are largely devoid of water. And we've all done that. I mean, if you grew up in the US like I did, you didn't get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich down without drinking something. It wasn't going down. Okay, there's a lot of things people eat that aren't, we eat cereal, dry cereal, but you got to pour a bunch of milk on it or something because it's not going down otherwise. Okay, the problem is, and there was a study, a paper published probably maybe 8 to 10 years ago now in Denmark. And they said that in their little study, they found that the average person had between 5 and 10 kilos, that's 11 to 22 pounds of old hard material stuck in their body. So now when people fast with me, and if, folks, again, if you're not familiar with me or haven't seen my videos, go to my YouTube channel. We have more than 100 videos with clients talking about their experience after they're done or as they're finishing their experience with us. They sit down and they share this experience. And you'll hear people, especially over the last few years, where people have said, oh, that stuff doesn't exist. What are you talking about? So I asked people, did you eliminate old hard material? And they're like, oh, yeah. We had people, I had a guy, actually, I in Europe, as I mentioned, I did lectures over the last couple of weeks in Holland and Germany, and lectures and seminars. And there was a guy who organized events for me in Amsterdam. And he said he fasted with me about 6 or 8 months ago. And he said he had a bowel movement after he began refeeding. This is when we tend to start moving out the really old hard material. That's been, this is a guy who's 48 years old. So it's been building up for, nearly 5 decades. He said he poked it with a stick. It was as hard as a rock. Okay. I had a woman a year and a half ago who fasted with me for the second time. The first time she didn't eliminate much of the stuff. She was severely dehydrated and couldn't move it out and didn't drink enough water. Second time, she did a better job following instructions. But on the 19th night, this has not happened for most people, but she had already fasted once and had been following my diet to the letter for 2.5 years before fasting a second time. And on the 19th night, while still fasting, her roommate came to get me and said, she needs you. And I went to her room sometime late at night. She was lying in bed crying. She had just had a bowel movement that she said it felt like she passed 2 large chunks of concrete. That's how hard the stuff was. It can be painful. So the stuff builds up in the body. And I thought, how do we get 22 pounds? Well, if the average person, every time they eat, were to have one little tiny crumb-sized piece get stuck, I've done the math. For the average 50-year-old, there'd be roughly 20 plus pounds of stuff in there.
Wow.
Okay? That's how it builds up, one little tiny piece at a time. Okay, and the stuff is hard and dry. And every time we eat or drink, it's absorbing water like a giant sponge. And at night, we spend 8 to 10 hours not eating or drinking. Guess what? It dries out again. And the next morning, it's absorbing water when you eat and drink. You're never getting hydrated. You have to get that stuff out of your system before real hydration is even possible. And that doesn't happen with enemas or colonics or these other protocols. It doesn't happen. And I can say that because, again, our clients have come to us having done all those things. And it's only by fasting long enough and properly that they're able to move this stuff out. When they do, everything changes. Literally, everything changes. And I'm going to steer anybody interested to a series of videos we did with a German man a couple of years ago named Midhat, Midhat. He came to us. He had done a lot of dry fasting. He was in his mid-50s, around 54. He had deep crevices in his face, these deep, deep lines. That's dehydration. Okay. He fasted for, I think it was between 30 and 40 days. I don't remember how long now. Followed my directions. By the time he left us, he's an engineer. He'd rigged something up to actually measure the mass of his stool. And at the end, when I said, how much old stuff do you eliminate? He said, I said, do you think it was 5 kilos? He said, I eliminated 3 kilos last night of this stuff. Last night. He said, no, it's been at least 10 kilos already that he'd eliminated. And by the time he left us, 6 or 8 weeks after he arrived, the lines in his face were much softer. He went home, back to Germany, came back for our annual fruit festival 3 months later, and those lines in his face were practically gone. Because he was able to level his hydration way up. That's what happens. Okay, that's what happens. We didn't get into all the huge negative ramifications of being dehydrated, but it negatively affects everything, literally everything.
Thank you for that clarification. That's so important because we might be thinking we're doing stuff that's beneficial, and then you made that beautiful point.
Well, people think I'm going to drink 8 glasses of water. Yeah, that'll take care of it. Unfortunately, it doesn't. You still need to do that perhaps, but it's not going to be enough to hydrate you until you get the stuff out of your body.
Gotcha. All right. Well, let's get rolling with the questions because they're still coming in. So let's
Sure.
hold off on putting more questions in the chat, and let's see if we already come across it, because we've got quite a few. So the first one is, why do you not recommend using dark leafy greens when they are so rich in nutrients?
No, I do recommend eating dark leafy greens. I don't. I recommend eating soft leafy greens. Okay. Our closest primate relatives, with whom we share over 99.9% of our DNA, have practically the identical digestive tract. Eat the tip, the softest part of a soft leaf, and throw the rest away. Okay.
Awesome.
The problem is when we eat kale and collard greens and cabbage, the research has shown we don't absorb many nutrients because we can't digest these things. Now we can cook them, which breaks down the cellulose so we can get the nutrients, but then we actually destroy nutrients and we create toxic compounds. If we're eating them raw the way we're intended to eat, and like every other species on the planet, then we have a very hard time digesting these leaves that are very high in cellulose and other resistant starches. And so the science is very clear that we do much better sticking to things our bodies can actually digest, like lettuce, for instance. Soft, non.
So what type of greens would you recommend? What type of lettuce?
The best types, I mean, any type of lettuce is fine.
Okay.
There's probably at least 2 or 2.5 dozen different varieties. They're all fine. Okay. When we get into the cabbages and kales and collard greens, we're not getting much benefit from those things because we can't digest them very well.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. Why do you recommend, this is somebody who watches your videos. They also wanted to say they missed your Friday lives, your Friday morning YouTube lives.
I'm still doing Friday lives every Friday on Instagram. All of my accounts were hacked back on the 30th of January. I haven't been able to get back into my YouTube channel. So I started a new Instagram channel, but I'm still live. I did the live. This is right now it's 11 o'clock, I think, Costa Rica time. And so that live happens at 9 a.m. I did it here a couple hours ago, but only on my Instagram channel.
Okay. We'll put all of Loren's contact information. We'll post it in the group later with the video. So thank you for that. Why do you recommend watermelon and papaya when they are low in minerals and vitamins? The person said, when you look back throughout history, those that didn't get enough nutrients died, and those who ate well-rounded plants flourished. Okay,
so I encourage people to eat a whole variety of different fruits, and I encourage everyone to eat leafy greens, which are loaded with minerals. But in most cases, the problem, and I see this all the time with clients, the problem isn't that they're not getting enough nutrients. The problem is that their body, I mean, they're not getting enough, even though they're eating them. Okay. So it's not about how much we put into our mouths. It's about how much actually gets to the cells. And that's about how well the body's functioning. So we can get, I mean, all the minerals and vitamins we need for a whole year would fit into a thimble, the little tiny cup that goes on your thumb. Okay. We don't need a lot of vitamins and minerals. We need to be able to actually absorb and use the ones that we're getting with our diets now. And we do that by getting our body clean and then eating properly. I don't recommend only watermelon and papaya, although watermelon and papaya are both amazing foods and two of my staples, things I eat 4 or 5 times a week. I eat a lot less food than most people do. I have a lot fewer nutrients coming in, and yet I have no deficiencies whatsoever. Okay, it's not about eating more nutrients.
Perfect. And then their last question is, let's see, like a person that has cancer, is it better for them? Do you recommend veggie juices for someone healing from cancer? And if so, what would be the best veggies? They also know that you don't necessarily recommend a lot of veggies, but their reasoning behind it is because there are many healing stories out there of people just on carrots. Would healing, doing veggie juices lead someone down the wrong road? Yeah.
So again, I mean, anyone who's going from, say, a standard diet, anywhere in the world, it could be the US or anywhere else, any standard diet. And I've been all over the world. Standard diets are pretty much crap, no matter where you are. If you're eating a standard diet and you go to a diet of juices, your body is investing a lot less energy in processing food, and you will be much better able to cleanse and heal the body. Having said that, cancer is is fed not by sugar in the diet. I mean, people eating fruit do perfectly well, but by excess blood sugar. And so carrot juice, beet juice, and all fruit juices are exceptionally high in sugar and have a high glycemic load, which means they have a large impact on blood sugar. Roughly three to four times the impact of eating those whole foods, okay, because we take the fiber out, and so the sugar is rapidly absorbed. Vegetable juices contain excessive amounts of protein, and excess protein actually leads to disease. So I don't encourage people with cancer or any other condition to drink juices. Juices are unnatural, are far inferior to whole foods. Far better would be to fast on water, and then when eating, to eat whole foods.
Thank you. Thank you. And let's go ahead, because I know this has come up several times and you've alluded to it and you've also talked about it. Why don't we talk about what kind of diet that you do recommend? You've already said, high fruit and high veggies, but if you could just give like some examples of what that is, because everybody wants to know, well, what do you eat and how much water does Loren drink a day?
Sure. Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, I typically eat twice a day. Although that's not a hard and fast rule. In most cases, first meal is between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. Second meal is usually between 6 and 7 in the evening. Usually it's about a 20-hour period that I'm not processing food. The first meal of the day is usually going to be watermelon or papayas or some other melon, or it could be any fruit meal. It's going to be a mono fruit meal in almost every case. Here in Europe right now, we've had watermelon, but the watermelons haven't been that good. Today I had Gallia melons. Other days it's been oranges. It could be peaches, although we haven't seen many of them yet. We've seen some decent peaches. Second meal of the day for me, some days is also fruit. At least 2 days, 3 days a week. For me, it's a salad of some type. My girlfriend and I like to do lettuce wraps. So we'll just slice up some avocado, slice up some tomato, slice up some cucumber. We'll, grab heads of lettuce with large leaves, lay some things in there, wrap it up, and eat it that way. Prefer that to knife, eating knife and fork. But, however you get it in is okay. So that's typically it. I mean, it's my diet now for 31 and a half years has been all raw. It's been vegan, and there's no need for animal products whatsoever. Again, excess protein, which all animal products contain a lot of protein. Excess protein ensures that we age and die faster. So we don't need to worry about those things.
Beautiful. And how much water, and I know it's, there's going to be that individuality factor, but people are also trying to determine, wonder, how much water do you drink a day? And then let's say for those that are water fasting on the Fridays with us, do you typically recommend, how do we gauge that for ourselves?
Well, unfortunately, it's a little bit difficult to gauge for yourself, because what happens to most people is they actually lose touch with their thirst mechanism as they become dehydrated. And so it's very difficult for most people to tell for themselves how much they need. But I figured out how to interpret daily vital signs. And so when someone's fasting, we have someone on staff, a nurse, who is checking vital signs every day, and then a doctor or I who is interpreting them. For many years, decades, it was me. I've now got training in MD, and I've actually taught more than a dozen MDs how to interpret vital signs in ways that they never learned in medical school, that they weren't aware of. So we can actually interpret their vital signs to see whether they're getting enough water or not. For most people fasting, it's going to be around 4 liters a day at the beginning of the process. Now, if you're fasting for 1 day, 4 liters is probably a good amount. What's critically important, and I've modeled this a little bit while we've been talking, you might have noticed I've been talking for the last 2.5 hours. So what I do is I sip tiny amounts of water like this, just a little bit at a time. The issue is that our kidneys have a limit, and they can process safely. Science says up to 1 liter an hour, but I've seen people get in trouble drinking that much. Okay, so I ask people not to drink more than half that much. And for those of you from the US, 500 milliliters, half a liter, is just a little bit more than 16 ounces. So we can call it the same thing. right? A liter is just a little more than a quart. So if you're more comfortable with quarts, and we're talking about half a quart, a 16-ounce glass, slowly over the course of the hour, because it's a pace. It's not just a quantity. It's how much your two healthy kidneys can process at one time. If you drink, you drink a whole bunch of water right now and then wait half an hour and do it again, in the minute or so you're drinking it, kidneys can't handle it. It goes right into the bladder, taking electrolytes with it. Now, if you're fasting for one day, you probably don't have too much to worry about. Remember, my average client is fasting for nearly a month, and we need to make sure we're not flushing out electrolytes, okay? And so it's really important that you sip water slowly. And this is something you should always do, whether you're fasting or not. Because if you're drinking water faster than that, it's going into your bladder, you're not getting any benefit from it. And you're probably losing some electrolytes that way.
Thank you for that. Someone asked, can water fast help in healing inflammation, joint stiffness? Should one water fast or should one eat high water content fruits?
Fasting done properly is infinitely more powerful than eating optimally, okay? I mean, maybe infinite's the wrong word, but we don't know how to measure this. And I'll give you an example. I met a woman 25 or 26 years ago when I was speaking at a large event, and it took me 15 or 18 years, I think, to convince her to come fast with me. Okay. Now, I hadn't seen her. I saw her for several years in a row because she organized events for me in her city. But then I didn't see her she got very busy with her own business and didn't have time to organize those events. And so I didn't see her for a while. And I finally we would speak and she would say, I'm following the diet you recommend. Surely that's good enough. It's not good enough. She showed up. I couldn't believe how dehydrated she looked. She was a couple years older than me. She was, at the time, she was my age now. Now, I know it's getting dark here. The sun has now gone down behind the mountain. It's going to get dark pretty soon. But you can probably see that my skin is soft and smooth. I don't have a lot of wrinkles on my face. She had lots of wrinkles on her face, which is a sign of dehydration. It's long-term chronic dehydration that has us get wrinkled as we get older. And that's what she looked like. She was actually younger than I am now. And I hadn't seen her in years. I was really shocked. She had been eating perfectly for like about 18 years, but she fasted with me. She actually showed up at the airport. She had gone to visit her sister from her city to a city hundreds of miles away and realized only when she was about to board the plane, she didn't have her passport. And so she had to go back to her city, hundreds of miles north, get her passport, go back again from Seattle to LA. She wound up showing up 2 or 3 days late. So instead of fasting 21 days, she fasted, I think, 18. She accomplished in 18 days what she hadn't been able to accomplish in 18 years. Now, we've had other clients, 20 years, 22 years, eating perfectly, who completely changed their health history, their health and vitality by fasting for 21 days or more. Okay. Yeah. It's not something you can accomplish by eating optimally. It's not, it's good. I mean, you could do it maybe in 50 or 100 years. You can do it in 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. Fasting.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know this comes up and you talked about it a little bit at the top. What type of drinking water do you recommend? Like you said, there is that big debate and we're not asking you to go into that, but since you have you have extensive experience, if you would just share with us, what type of water do you recommend?
Absolutely. One of the things I would say, Alva, is that I firmly believe, when I started trying to figure out how to get my own health back, and I really started thinking about health at 14, as I mentioned earlier, I started studying nutrition. I realized that what we needed to do was figure out how to meet our body's needs the way that nature intended for this species, for the human species, right? I don't believe that we can do better than nature, all right? So what's natural? What do animals drink in nature? Well, they drink water from springs and streams, okay? But doesn't the inorganic minerals in that water hurt you? No, they don't. I mean, every species in nature is healthier than humans, and that's what they consume. In fact, one of some of all of the longest lived populations. I'm actually an island away from I live in a blue zone in Nicoya, Costa Rica. I'm an island away from a blue zone here in Greece. There's a blue zone on the next island over. We're going over there on Sunday. And people there drink what? They drink the spring water that comes out of the mountain springs and the streams. That's what they drink. Okay. There's nothing better than that as long as it's clean. The problem is we've polluted much of the planet's groundwater. So the fact that water comes up out of the ground does not mean that it's fit for consumption. If you have a spring close to you, fantastic. What I would do if I wasn't sure about the quality of the water is I would pay to get, if you can count on that water, possibly as a source of free water, pay to get it tested. Okay, we get our water tested every few months. Because it's coming out of the ground, you never know what might change. But in the 10 and a half years we've been at this particular site, the water is always tested practically perfect. I don't think we can do any better than that.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, Loren. So someone said how to complete an extended water fast frequently. They eat a fruitarian lifestyle with no overt fats.
Okay.
So they said that in their experience, longer water fast is more challenging to them when repeated on a regular basis. So they kind of wanted to know like what you recommend. They also said they're severely deficient in creatine based on some blood work. So they're wondering about blood sugar dysregulation and symptoms of insulin resistance when being fruitarian and not eating overt fats as well.
Okay. Well, there is no need for most people to eat overt fats because the cell nucleus of every living cell is made of fat. And so you can get all the fat you need eating watermelon and papayas and pineapples and mangoes and apples and oranges, wherever you live, whatever fruits and leafy greens are available, all of them contain tiny amounts of fat. And we don't actually need more than that if the body's balanced and working properly. Many people, again, first of all, as I said earlier, nobody who really understands fasting would ever recommend anybody do an extended fast without having experience guidance. And when we talk to people who do fast, what we find is that they usually have made significant mistakes in their fasting. And so, if you're having challenges, you said fasting repeatedly or regularly. I recommend most people wait at least 6 months between fasts of 3 weeks or longer. If a fast is only a week, that's a different story, and we'd have to look at the situation. But fasting repeatedly is probably not helping because you're not giving your body enough time to balance itself after the fast. Okay, fasting is one piece, but the body needs time. It takes at least 3 to 4 weeks for the average body to get all the garbage out of the bloodstream after completing a fast of that length. Okay, it's going to take people, if they do this properly, it can take people as long as months to get all the old waste out of the colon that they're going to be able to get out. And so I don't recommend, people finishing a fast, waiting a week and doing it again. That's always a mistake. And in most cases is going to wind up creating deficiencies and all kinds of other issues. Okay, so fasting isn't, extended fasting isn't a lifestyle. Okay, it's a remedial process that we use to allow the body to cleanse and heal. The whole point is to be making excellent choices in the meantime. And so you want to fast and then make excellent choices for at least 6 months, and then you can fast again. But honestly, plan on getting experience guidance. I guarantee you'll have a much better experience that way.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'll just recap something you said earlier is that you don't recommend individuals water fasting for more than 7 days without that guidance. So like if we did 7 days, then like you said, eat optimally high water content fruits and veggies, and then repeat the process or go to Tanglewood or, that type of thing. And if you would repeat this again, because there's questions sometimes I see here about people have about specific conditions, but you said something really powerful about that symptoms, or what we call diagnosis, is the body trying to detox itself. Would you mind repeating that again? Because I think that'll answer.
That's right. Exactly. It's so important, because of course nobody wants to feel that. Well, I guess if we had enough people, there'd be 1 or 2 people that like pain, but most of us don't enjoy pain, right? Most of us want to feel good. And so it's natural, it's understandable that people want to eliminate symptoms almost regardless of what they need to do to eliminate them. The problem is that when we suppress symptoms, which is what drugs do, which is what herbs do, which is what almost everything that people do in the name of healing is really about suppressing symptoms. We're preventing our amazing, virtually infinitely intelligent body from cleansing and healing, because symptoms are nothing more than evidence that the body's attempting to cleanse or heal. So let me give you a very powerful example. It can be a much longer story, but I'll cut it short. I met a 47-year-old man who said to me that he was perfectly healthy, that he never got sick. And I said to him, well, never getting sick might be a good thing. He said, what do you mean might be a good thing? I said, well, getting sick means your body is detoxing, it's cleansing and healing. Okay. So obviously, if you're constantly sick, then there's a problem. But if you're never sick, it could be because the body is completely clean and healthy and doesn't need to detoxify. And it could be because the body doesn't have enough energy to detoxify. Okay. And I met this person. I spent an hour walking down the beach with him side by side. He was a billionaire. And he said to me at the end, he said, you've convinced me it's going to take me 6 months. I'm going to clear my schedule. I'm going to come and fast with you. He was 47 years old. It never happened. 2 months later, he dropped dead in Paris. He was never sick.
Wow.
He didn't have enough energy to continue living. When the woman who introduced us said, what do you think? I said, I think he's in bad shape. She said, what do you mean? I said, he's got less energy than this. I mean, I'm a Reiki master. I stood shoulder to shoulder with him, could feel nothing from him. I can feel your energy. The computer, I can feel your energy. This guy could feel nothing. And so there are people who never get sick because they don't have enough energy to create the symptoms that the body needs to actually heal. Having symptoms isn't bad. If the body needs to cleanse and heal, you want it to have symptoms. Okay. Doing anything to suppress those symptoms is preventing the body from cleansing and healing. And this is completely misunderstood by practically everyone. Right?
That's
so most
so
people
beautiful you said that. I was just thinking that those who practice the raw vegan or fruitarian lifestyles, we often confuse what I like to call, which I got this term from Loren Whiteman, a healing event, as that's actually the body operating properly. It's supposed to be expelling these toxins. It may not feel great, but it's supposed to do that actually what I'm doing is working. That's a sign. Like she says, celebrate it. That's why she calls it a healing event, because the body's supposed to be giving you this uncomfortable experience while it's shedding, the toxins. And
that's right. Yeah. In fact, let me just add one piece. People say all the time, oh, fasting that's difficult and uncomfortable. It's painful. It's not. Fasting is not difficult or uncomfortable, painful at all. Detoxification often is.
Yes.
Okay? I still fast, although there's very little detoxification necessary. So why do I fast? I fast because when I'm free, when I have free time, I like to be active. Okay. Now I used to ski, and I've been pulled over on almost every ski resort in North America by the ski patrol with my buddies. And they said, if you don't slow down, we're taking lift tickets. I've been in accidents. I have a motorcycle. I drive a quadricycle. I've rolled it twice and broke a couple toes doing so. I rock climb. I surf and body surf. Because that's what young men do at 62, right? And when I injure myself, I fast so my body can heal as quickly as possible. But it's not painful or uncomfortable at all because my body is not detoxifying. When you're dumping toxins into your bloodstream, you're not going to feel very well. But if you don't go through that, you're not going to be very well. You can't be. You've got to get the garbage out of the body.
Thank you for that. And I know I've heard you say this in a video, and you did kind of point at it here. Now that you've done so much work, you don't have to fast on a regular basis. But like you just said, I do know that you've had a few injuries because of your very active lifestyle, that you immediately go into a 7-day or whatever it is your body calls for, period. So I just wanted to speak that out into the call, because people want to know, like, do you have this weekly routine of fasting? And
I don't. I did for 2.5 years. I fasted once a week. It was actually about a 40 or 42 hour fast, because I would have my last meal on Saturday night, at 6 or 7 o'clock. I would eat nothing on Sunday. I would have my first meal between noon and 2 on Monday. And I did that every weekend for about 2.5 years. And then I realized, oh, it actually takes the body about 3 days just to really initiate the process of ketosis. And so I started doing 3 to 4 day fast once a month. And then I realized, oh, it takes the body 10 to 11 days to be fully into that part of the process, and then I started doing the extended fast. And that's when things really took off. And when we see the miracles that we see, it's almost always with people doing these much longer fasts. It's not that you can't get benefit from shorter ones, you can, but it's a much more superficial cleanse. And so I fast now, as you just said, when I injure myself. I just fasted recently. I dislocated my left shoulder surfing in a very big wave. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you that I was in pain and didn't even realize it was dislocated. It's actually quite painful, but I've got a pretty high tolerance for pain. So we have a massage therapist who is almost full-time at Tanglewood when we're open. We have two of them. We keep them both very busy. One of them is actually a chiropractor. And one day I said to her, I think I might have dislocated my shoulder. And she checked and said, yeah, you dislocated it. I'll put it back for you. And then I thought, okay, it's been out now for several weeks already. I should probably fast to allow this to heal. And so I recently did a 7 or 8 day fast. It happens about once a year, but I've got some kind of accident, some kind of physical trauma that I'm fasting for. In almost every case, in fact, in this case, I fasted while we were open at Tanglewood and nobody knew. I didn't tell my staff and I didn't tell my clients, and we can tell when they're fasting. It's obvious because they're detoxifying and they don't look and feel so well. Nobody could tell I was fasting because I still have tons of energy. I still feel perfectly fine. That's what happens when you're not detoxifying. When it's about healing, energy is still there. We have energy because we don't run on food. We run on electricity. My body is still making electricity by converting my reserves into energy. Okay, so I feel perfectly fine.
I love that you make that distinction. Fasting is easy. Detoxifying can be challenging and uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Also, that via fasting, if we make that commitment to do that, to help the body get clean, then we get to run off of these incredible storage of energy, our own inner electricity. So thank you for making that distinction. Okay, our next set of questions are, what sort of shampoos, soaps, and things like that? They're not necessarily saying so much about product recommendation, but like as we're getting cleaner, wanting to make sure that we're not putting toxins into. So like, are any ingredients that they should look out for, stay away from?
Well, yeah. I can't speak to this as intelligently as I used to be able to because it's been so long since I looked at these products. There are many ingredients, even in organic products. In fact, there's an organization called the Environmental Working Group, EWG.org. And they publish every year a database of personal care products, including organic products. And they rate the products. Now, they depend on the companies providing with information, and some of them refuse to. And so they don't always have all the information they need, but they rate products. I think it's like a 0 to 10 on how likely they are to be carcinogenic. And even organic products are often much higher than you'd expect them to be, okay? Because some of the ingredients they're allowed to put in there aren't very healthy. And in fact, in the US and probably many other countries, if an ingredient makes up less than 1% of the label, they don't have to put it on the label at all. So you don't even know what's in these products you're buying. So more than 30 years ago, I realized that, because I'd already done quite a bit of fasting, that I no longer needed because no one needs these products. I stopped using them. I don't use toothpaste. I don't use soap. I don't use deodorant. I don't use shampoo. Obviously, I don't have as much need for shampoo as I used to. The truth is, I carry a trimmer with me, and I trim my head every 2 or 3 days. I still have lots of hair here, a little bit less here, and I just don't like the way it looks. So I just keep it all very, very short. I could still have quite long hair, but there's no need for those things. When you get your body clean, it doesn't smell bad. You don't need these things. The scalp stays balanced. The body stays balanced without soap. My girlfriend tells me I smell like fruit most of the time. I don't smell bad, even when I'm sweating, even when I'm working out. When people do, it means there's toxicity there.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that. I'm noticing something similar. And one person asked how to help with the low stomach acid issue.
The way to help with the low, and it's a really good point. Most people aren't aware of this, but it's a well-known fact that virtually everybody is hypoacidic, i.e. has too little stomach acid. And it's interesting because prior to the advent of Viagra, the number one type of drug sold in the world were antacids. And most people already have too little stomach acid. So what are they doing there? Again, they're suppressing symptoms. The reason that this happens, I believe, and this is not something medicine's ever looked at. Why is it that everyone's low in stomach acid? I believe it's because everyone's dehydrated. The way to correct this problem is to get your body fully hydrated, which you can do by fasting long enough and properly, and then eating properly and sipping enough water. You get yourself hydrated, because then your body, and only then, will your body make all the stomach acid it needs. What happens, I believe, in the average virtually infinitely intelligent body is your body says, you know what, let's back off a little bit on stomach acid, right? Let's not put the same concentration of acid into the stomach. I mean, think about this for a second. Your stomach is a bag made of protein. Hydrochloric acid is dumped into your stomach to digest protein. How does that work? How do you put a protein digesting acid into a bag made of protein? Well, a healthy stomach is protected by a mucous membrane, a layer of mucus that protects the stomach. But mucus is made around 99% of water. So because the average person is dehydrated, that stomach protection is not very complete. It's not healthy. And so what does an intelligent body do? Rather than digesting its own stomach, it makes less stomach acid.
Wow.
We fix that by making the body hydrated so the stomach's protected, and then it's able to make all the stomach acid it needs.
Wow. That's fascinating. Thank you for that. And one question that's come up a few times is for people that live in maybe countries or areas where they don't have access to spring water or like a really clean source. Yeah. In that type of situation, might you recommend distilled, or what would be your recommendation?
I would literally never, ever recommend distilled water.
Okay.
Distilled water is negatively charged. It bonds with anything positively charged. People who promote it say it only bonds with positively charged toxins in your bloodstream. But if you remember magnetism from 6th grade, it doesn't work that way. You have something negatively charged, it's going to attract anything positively charged. Positively charged molecules in your bloodstream include sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And if you drink distilled water, it's going to take these electrolytes out of your bloodstream. Distilled water is unnatural and should be consumed by no one, in my opinion. Okay. So if you can't get clean spring water naturally from the spring yourself, you could buy it. I understand that can get expensive, but that's an option. Another option would be to use a home reverse osmosis unit. Not ideal. They still leave the water negatively charged, but much less so, because they leave about 10% of the minerals in the water, where distillation removes them all. Okay, as long as there's still some minerals in the water, you're going to get a better result.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Someone wanted to know, what do you feel about putting ice in drinks or juice, drinking hot tea, like sencha or hot lemon water, as opposed to room temperature water and beverages? And I would even say food too, right? Like, how do you feel about eating cold?
Ideally, I mean, I will eat cold food every once in a while on a hot day, a little banana ice cream or a smoothie. This is an occasional treat for me. Normally, generally speaking, consistently on a day-to-day basis, I'm eating foods that are between room temperature and body temperature. And that should be the case with everything we consume, food and drink. Okay, hot drinks are bad for your teeth. They're bad for your tissue. They're bad for your throat. They're bad for your entire tissue. And they, if we think people burn themselves by spilling coffee on their skin, the skin inside your digestive tract is much more sensitive than the skin on the outside of your body. Okay, so no one should be consuming things that are super hot. And really super cold too is not ideal. Everything should be between room temperature and body temperature. But by the way, I realized I never answered a much earlier question. I don't think it's so relevant because you're not me. No one listening is me except me, right? So, but the question was, how much water do I drink? I don't drink very much water, but I'm the most hydrated person we've ever measured consistently. Okay. And that's because I began fasting 35 years ago, got my body clean, and keep it that way. Keep it hydrated by eating optimally. Once your system is clean, it doesn't take much water to stay hydrated if you're eating correctly. Okay. So on an average day, I probably drink one large glass of water. And that's much more than I used to drink before I was speaking 5 to 6 hours every day, doing consultations and group calls, coaching calls. Now that I spend all this time speaking, I need a little bit more water than I used to. Okay. But for most of you listening, if you're not fasting, whether you're fasting or not, most people need 3 to 4 liters a day in my experience until they get the body truly clean.
Cool. Thank you. I'm going to try to group a couple of questions together here.
Sure.
One was, what are your thoughts about friends and family who are seemingly overweight, carnivores, whatever? Do you recommend telling them about like healthy alternatives or letting them find their own way?
Okay, that's a great question. What I would say is that, let me say it this way. Okay, I think everyone has to make their own choice. I mean, first of all, if you love these people, you care about these people, you probably have made them what I will call the mistake of trying to shove it down these people's throats. Okay, no one appreciates that. That doesn't work very well, right? I learned the hard way. No one wants to have anything shoved down their throat. And unfortunately, the fact is that often the people who most need it are least interested or least willing to consider making changes. So it has nothing to do with how much somebody needs it. But I believe that I have a responsibility to share with anybody that I think would benefit. Now, I can say to somebody, hey, I understand you're dealing with this issue. Would you like to hear about an alternative? No. Or what is it? I'll tell them no or yes. Okay. And even if they say yes, and then I can clearly see as I'm speaking to them that they're like their eyes are glazing over, or they're clearly, they're indicating actively they're not interested. Okay, you know what? I see that the information I have, which I know to be life-changing for anyone who's willing to employ it, most people aren't interested. They're just not willing to change. And so I can offer this information as a gift to someone. If they're not interested, that's okay. I have no attachment to them doing anything with the gift. Of course, I want the people I love and everyone to be as healthy as possible, but that's their responsibility. So I believe I do have a responsibility to share it or ask them if they're interested in knowing, but they may not be. And I think it's important. I mean, for those of you listening, the first step is you've got to take care of your own health. And I'll share a very quick story with you. Years ago, I did a lecture tour in Ontario, Canada. There was a woman who kept showing up to my events. She showed up at probably 7 or 8 different events over the course of about 2 weeks. And on the last event, she said to me, she said, Loren, I've been saying the same things to people that you've been saying at all these events, but no one listens to me. And I said to her, with all due respect, why would they? This was someone who was roughly 5'2" and roughly 200 pounds. And I said, why would they why would they take health advice from you when you're not healthy yourself? Okay. The first step is to heal yourself. Okay. I think I said to you early on this broadcast, but I took care of my own health in about 6 months. And then people started coming up to me saying, oh my God, what did you do? Can you help me? I didn't have to go out there and try to convince people. The people who were interested and open came to me. Now, some of them, I remember once I was walking down the street in Washington, D.C. with my girlfriend at the time. This is many years ago. She was an English woman. She was, she had fasted. She was eating a perfect diet. We're walking down the street and we pass a woman, middle-aged woman, and we hear behind us, we hear, excuse me. We turn around and she's looking back at us. We turn around and walk back and we say, yeah. She says, I've never seen 2 people who look as healthy as you two. What do you do? And so we started to tell her and she said, okay, thank you. And she hurried off as quickly as she could because she was clearly not interested in changing anything. Okay.
Got
But
it.
I would say offer it to people and understand that, most people may not be interested. That's okay.
Thank you. I love that. It's really interesting. Over the last year, a lot has changed. I've gotten healthier and my body's changed, and I'm no longer on a walker. And, people that are close to me know. At first, I was telling everyone, and then halfway through, this voice just kept saying, be the living example. Just keep doing yourself, be the living example. And like you said, that if someone asks you, tell, and tell with no attachment. So thank you for that. Can you speak to one thing we have not talked about, but oftentimes when fasting or in the cleansing and healing mode, can you talk a little bit about mindset and how important that is? Because I know I recently watched one of your videos that I hadn't seen in a while, and I found it really helpful, because there's two ways I think I'd like for you to talk about it. One, the importance of our mindset is equally, in my opinion, equally as important as what we're eating, because we can eat really healthy, and if we have a bad mindset, that's going to show up in the body as well.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, absolutely. It's critically important. I would say perhaps it's the most important thing. It's it doesn't matter what. I mean, I remember a client once who said, I had a naturopathic doctor working for me at the time. And he said to the client, if you want to heal, you have to believe that healing is possible. And this guy said, no, that's way too much responsibility for me. Right? He didn't want to take responsibility for believing that he could heal. Ford Motor Company founder Henry Ford once famously said, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. Okay, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So anybody who thinks that their body can't heal, they're probably not going to. Okay, and even if the body could heal, it probably won't unless you believe that it can. If you want to heal, you have to believe it's possible, and I think you need to shift your mindset to empower yourself for that possibility. So if you listen to doctors, I've had many clients who've been told they've got 3 weeks or 4 weeks to live, 2 months to live. There was one woman who came to us with the same brain tumor that had killed her mother and her sister, who both had medical treatment. And when the oncologist said to her, you need the same treatment that your mother and sister got, she said, well, it didn't work out very well for them. I think I'll pass on that. I'm going to try something else. And she came and fasted with me, and she was told she had months to live if she didn't get this medical treatment. That was 3.5, nearly 4 years ago. And she's perfectly well today. Okay. So mindset is critically important, and not just for health, but for everything. And I understand a lot of people have been beat down in life. A lot of people have very low self-esteem and just don't believe they're capable of anything. I think you have to realize that you're capable of absolutely anything, that each of us is part of the divine creative energy of the universe, that there's nothing you can't do if you believe that you can. Okay. When someone says to you, you've probably heard this before, those people who believe that something can't be done shouldn't interrupt those who are doing it.
Ah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Right?
That bears repeating, Loren. Say that again.
Yeah, those people who say that something can't be done shouldn't interrupt those people who are doing it. Okay, so if you've got people, if you're listening here and you've got people in your life telling you that you can't do this, you can't do that, you can thank them for sharing their opinion, and then you can excise that belief and that energy from your life. Okay, and I mean, you get to decide, right? I've got family members I love, but I don't want to spend much time with because they're very, very negative.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you don't have to spend time with people that you love. It's up to you. You get to choose where to put your time and energy. And I like to surround myself by people that are positive.
So you bring in a beautiful point. Oftentimes too, on this path of returning to our natural species specific diet, people might live with family members that don't eat that way, or roommates, or how to interact socially. That seems to be a big thing. Can you speak to that? I know you have the beautiful luxury of living at Tanglewood and,
Right.
traveling with, like you said, people, but can you speak to how to stay focused or in our own lane with our own healing, even though we might be preparing food for children and other things like that? Because sometimes people say, often we hear it said, this is a very lonely journey. And just
Well, it can be, especially, I mean, again, I would say that once again, mindset is really the important piece, because when I started this journey, well over 30 years ago, I literally didn't know another single person anywhere that was doing what I was doing, not fasting, not eating this way. And it didn't feel lonely at all. I mean, it's not, yes, it would have been nice if there were people who understood those things, but I didn't let that interfere with my having relationships with people that I love and cared about. It doesn't have to interfere. It's almost like we make it a problem. It becomes a problem because we make it one. Okay. I remember once, I've never paid much attention to Dr. Phil, but I walked into my sister's house once. I lived in DC and she lived in Boston, and I was up there to give a lecture that night. There was a raw vegan restaurant in her town. She doesn't live there anymore. But as I walked in the door, she was watching Oprah, and Dr. Phil was on the show, and he was saying, if you had any idea how infrequently people thought about you, you wouldn't worry what they thought about you.
Yes, you're right.
And I mean, I think it was a famous motivational speaker and business coach, and I can't remember this guy's name, an American, who once said, what other people think of me is none of my business.
None of my business. Yes.
My business is what I think of me. Am I making choices that I'm in integrity with? I don't need anybody else to understand. Now, obviously, if people are going to belittle me or harass me for my choices, then I don't want to spend time with them. And, I had years ago, I went raw. I began fasting. I lost a lot. I went from 165 to 128 pounds. And I didn't own a scale, and I didn't own a full length mirror. And because I'd had irritable bowel syndrome for years and was constantly bloated prior to this, I bought all my pants a couple inches too big, even my shorts and jeans, and I wore braces, suspenders that buttoned in. So my clothes were always loose because I couldn't have anything tight. It was so uncomfortable around my waist for those 3 years that I was sick. And so I didn't, most people can tell they're losing weight because the scale says so, or because their clothes get loose, or because they can see it in the mirror. I didn't have a mirror, I didn't own a scale, and all my clothes were already loose. And so my family was harassing me because I was getting quite lean, and I didn't really realize how lean it was. In fact, I had a beard, so it wasn't even that visible on my face. And I was at a friend's house, and we were listening to music in his basement, and because his wife didn't want the big speakers in the living room. And I walked up the stairs in front of him. This is a guy I'd known since we were like, 10, 12 years old. And he said, Loren, what happened to your ass? I said, what do you mean? He said, you don't have one. And so I went into his bathroom, and I'm looking in the mirror of my shirt. I'm like, oh, he's right, it's gone. And there was a scale sitting there. So I got on the scale. That's when I saw it was 128 pounds. I thought, okay, this is why people are freaked out about how much I weigh, how thin I am. But, I would say to them, I feel amazing. Okay. But I finally, because they were harassing me about eating more and different things, and I sat them all down. I mean, it was a family weekend. There were about 25 people there. My extended, my siblings and their husbands and wives and kids. And I sat everyone down and said, listen, okay, I was 30 or 31 at the time. I said, I know you don't understand what I'm doing. Okay. I know you don't understand my diet and the choices I'm making. You don't understand fasting, and that's okay. You don't have to. Okay. I'm a big boy now. Okay. It's my life. It's my body. It's my health. They're my choices. It's okay if you don't understand. If you keep harassing me about food and how much I'm eating, what I'm eating, I'm going to stop coming to family functions. Okay. So let's make a deal. Okay. You leave me alone about what I'm eating, and I won't harass you about what you're eating. And that was the last I heard anyone in my family harass me.
That's so beautiful.
I was
That's
born 30 years ago. Okay. So I think we always want to be as loving and gentle as possible, but we have to be willing to speak our truth and stand up for ourselves. We have to. Okay. We have to set boundaries. And this boundary was, hey, look, these are my choices. Leave me alone about this.
That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. A question that has come up is, when you're water fasting, what happens to the old? I think you kind of answered it, but so this might be a quick one for you. What happens to old and current poop while water fasting, and how can you help release it? Because you kind of touched on you don't support enemas, colonics, or herbs and stuff. So that
That's
can you
right.
speak to
What I would say, sort of generally speaking about those kinds of practices is that every time we attempt to manipulate the body in some way to create a particular outcome, we wind up creating unintended side effects. We don't need to do that. Okay. Virtually everybody who fasts with me winds up eliminating pounds and pounds, kilos and kilos, no matter, depending on where you're from, of old hard material. We don't need to do anything else. Okay. To support the body, what we need to do is we need to sip enough water while fasting. And after fasting, we need to focus on consuming high water content foods and continue sipping enough water. And that's it. That's all we have to do. Okay. Now, moving the body, not while fasting, it should be complete rest. Once we start refeeding, and by day 2, 3, 4 of refeeding, depending on how long one has fasted, when we feel ready, we can start walking. And then we can start jumping and doing jumping jacks and skipping rope. These kinds of activities help the body. Every time we move the body, the abdominal muscles massage the intestines, and that helps us eliminate. The only other thing is we should be squatting to eliminate. Okay. And I have at least one, if not more, videos talking about this on my YouTube channel. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm squatting, where your feet are on the toilet seat and you are squatting down. You're not standing up, you're down, but you're not sitting down, you're squatting on your feet. That's the natural position to eliminate from. And when you're trying to move old hard material out, it's a lot easier than if you're sitting down, because when you sit down, to go from squatting like this to sitting, you wind up creating a significant bend at the end of the colon, and it's much harder to get this old hard waste out. Okay. So that's the only other thing I would encourage anyone to really do to support the body in eliminating this stuff.
Perfect. Okay. So that brings 2 questions, which have also been asked. If we can continue with this one, if you're not at the place where you can squat yet, what do you recommend? Physically, if your body isn't at the place where you could squat on the toilet seat.
Okay. So if you're not able to squat, first of all, the first thing I would say is if you're not able to do it, and that's true for many people, to be able to squat that way, you need to have flexibility in your hips, your groins, your knees, and your Achilles tendons. And if you haven't been doing much yoga or these kind of activities, you might not be very flexible, especially if you're typically dehydrated, right? The more dehydrated we are, the more inflexible we become. And so what you might want to do is start right away practicing stretching these muscles. So you can roll up a yoga mat or a towel or a blanket and squat. If you can't get your heels to the ground, put something under your heels, whatever height you need to, and then drop it down just a little bit below what's comfortable. And every couple days, see if you can lower that support under your heels a little bit more until you can actually get your heels flat on the ground. Now, in the meantime, if you need to eliminate, what you can do is you can open a big plastic bag and you can go squat in the shower, holding on to the wall in front of you or the floor. Okay. You can't fall far because you're already on the floor. All right. So that's a way to get there until you're able to actually squat on a toilet seat.
Okay. And then going back to the example that you gave with your family, oftentimes when people are in detoxification mode, they do get quite lean and sometimes even smaller than that. The
Right.
question is what people worry about that. So what to do. You gave us a good example of how to respond to our families, but also could you speak to so that we can have peace with that process, if you will, like just go ahead and lean into that and trust the body's intelligence. It'll rebuild when it's ready to rebuild. But people tend to worry, not just their family members. There was someone worrying about like, what do I do when I get that small? How do I put the weight back on?
Yeah. The thing is, let me tell a story real quickly.
Okay.
I fasted a guy who actually is big in the juice fasting world and realm. Some of you might know him on Instagram, Jeff Juices. He's been juicing and eating a raw vegan diet, fruit-based diet for years to heal himself. By the time he was in his early 30s, he knew he was quite unwell. And he was getting better, but he wasn't getting really well. And he finally came and fasted with me 2 or 3 years ago. And he said to me, he said, I've been following you for years. I believe everything you say, but I was afraid to fast. And he was smart. He came and fasted with guidance. It was life-changing for him. But he came to us pretty lean already, having trouble building muscle and maintaining much weight. He's 6 feet tall, but was probably 130 some pounds. He got down to about 113 pounds. And I was visiting the area where he lived 3 months later. And he was a great guy, and we've become very good friends. He now lives in Bali, and I visited him there twice. He'll be coming back to fast with me again very soon, I think. But I was visiting him after the first one, and we said, hey, let's get together. And so a friend and I went to meet him. We went and met at a little fruit stand. We were all going to buy some fruit and then go to the beach and have a little picnic. And the first thing he said when we met him was, I haven't gained a pound since I left Tanglewood. And it had been 3 months. I haven't gained a single pound. I said, okay, how many bowel movements are you having every day? And he said, 5 to 6. And how many meals are you having? He said, 2 to 3. I said, well, you're not gaining weight because you're still eliminating lots of old hard material. Okay. So even if you're building back the body, it may not show up if you're eliminating enough old material. Okay. And for many people, it's going to be difficult to put that weight on to build the healthy weight because you're not assimilating until you get the old stuff out of the body. Okay. So, what I would say is don't worry about the weight. The weight will take care of itself, but it's not going to happen until your body's ready. So you want to continue to support the body by eating an optimal diet, as we've already described it, and sipping enough water. And of course, if you want to build muscle, you have to break down muscle. You have to do exercises. You're not going to build muscle by simply eating properly, right? You have to actually do the work. But if you do the work and you're having trouble building muscle, it may be that you're still not assimilating very well because there's enough stuff in there that's still stuck.
Perfect. Beautiful. Okay. So you've answered the optimal diet. You've answered about, let's start with, 4 liters of water a day, drinking about 16 a pint an hour so as not to tax our kidneys. Let's see here. So when you're raw vegan, eat a lot of fruit and it's not enough, you're still dehydrated. How often should you fast on a regular basis? That's an interesting question.
We talked about that too. No more. Most people should not be fasting long fast for more than once every 6 months or so. Okay. And the key it's not about how many times we fast. If you fast one time for 21 days or more, and you do it properly, which almost always means with experienced guidance, you will almost certainly eliminate pounds and pounds of old hard material. And when you do that, you're going to be able to get hydrated. Your hydration goes way up. I gave you the example earlier of the guy from Germany in his 50s who came with deep crevices in his face. 3 months after he left, they were practically gone because he'd gotten all this old waste out and was then able to hydrate the body by simply eating and sipping enough water.
Yeah, you did. How does somebody know if they have the proper electrolyte balance, like prior to water fasting?
Well, we require every client to go and get a simple blood test for sodium, potassium, and chloride levels before they start. And ideally, about a month before they start is ideal, because if anything is too low, then we have enough time to correct it before they start and they get tested again. Okay.
Beautiful.
Because these electrolytes are critically important. I mean, magnesium and calcium are also important, but it's sodium and potassium that could stop your heart if they're too low, right? And so we want to make sure that we don't get people in serious trouble. Now, the science is very clear that when we begin fasting, the electrolytes do fall off a bit, but then they stabilize, even over a long fast. Okay, so as long as someone starts off in good shape, there's almost no chance they're going to wind up having a problem, as long as they start in the right place and are doing what they need to do and not making mistakes. And that's why it's important people take coaching.
And you said something really beautiful. I know I've heard you say this many times, that you also mentioned before, this hasn't been asked, but I'm just going to throw this out there. before somebody would do a 7-day. I believe I've heard you say on more than one call to eat the optimal diet for at least 3 weeks prior to doing an extended water fast would be.
Well, it's ideal. It's not necessary, and it's unfortunately it's not that uncommon for someone. This is just human nature. Some people will show up having just eaten a steak and drank a bunch of beer and smoked a cigar. They're like, I'm not going to do these things again, so I'm going to do it all right now. That's a bad way to get started, because you put something in your system like meat, which contains no fiber and very little water. Your body has a hard time moving that stuff out, and you're going to go through the fast with the stuff sitting in your system. So it's much better to eat as close to optimally as possible for 3 to 4 weeks before fasting, but it's not absolutely necessary. People who do it are going to get better results. It's going to be easier and less uncomfortable. But we take people all the time who, you can go the other way. I had a woman once, a young woman, she was still in school, and she began fasting. We planned this for months, and we talked about exactly what she needed to do. She begins fasting and she starts vomiting right away. And this went on and on. And I said, what did you do before you came? She said, well, to be honest, for the last couple of weeks, I just ate donuts. Nothing but donuts. Okay, bad idea. You don't want to do that. The cleaner your diet is, the easier the process will be, and the more benefits you'll get, because you'll actually start further ahead. Okay, but even people who are eating normally, it's okay. They're not in danger. It's just going to be a little bit less comfortable.
Awesome. Can you talk about some people experience when fasting or in the detoxification mode, if it's eating, this species specific diet, high fruit, high water content, veggies, lettuces, like you said, sleeplessness. Can you talk a little bit about that and how to maybe just ride that wave?
Well, I think it's important to not worry too much about that. Again, look, the whole point of the process is to rest as completely as possible. Okay. If you look at any animal, your cat or dog, if it gets sick enough, will lay down and will refuse food. You can put it right in front of it. It won't touch it. Instinctively, they know that healing the body requires so much energy. They don't have enough energy to process food. Okay. And so they'll simply stop eating. That's what happens. Throughout our lives, anybody here, if you've ever been sick with a cold or flu or anything else, you probably felt worse at night than you did during the day. Now, if you've been lucky enough to be able to fall asleep every night, maybe you felt fine. But a lot of people have trouble sleeping when they're sick. And the reason why is because we're diurnal animals, meant to be awake in daylight hours and sleep at night. When it gets dark, as you can see, it is now completely dark here. When it gets dark, this is the light of my laptop you're seeing me through. When it gets dark, our bodies shift into a different state. Everything relaxes and we're liberating energy the body can use to cleanse and heal. And so people detoxify faster at night than during the day. And for many people, that's going to mean it's going to be hard to sleep. Okay, sleep patterns may be upset. It doesn't happen to everyone, but it happens to a lot of people. It's okay. Okay, your job is to rest in the dark all night long. No lights, no screens, just darkness. Okay, so whether you're asleep or not doesn't matter. As long as you're resting in the dark, you should be fine.
Awesome. And someone asked, what's the difference between fasting and starvation?
Well, it's very simple. Fasting is a beneficial process where the body is living on its reserves, which enables it to cleanse and heal at an accelerated rate. Starvation only happens when we've used up those reserves and the body is now consuming vital tissue because there isn't any more fat reserves to consume. Okay, and so fasting ends when reserves end. If we continue not eating, we're no longer fasting, we're now starving. Starving is not beneficial, will inevitably end in death if taken to its extreme, right? Fasting is always beneficial when done properly. The two never overlap. Fasting is never starving. Now, science often talks about the two things as if they're the same. In fact, in Yoshinori Osumi's papers, where he talks about the benefits of autophagy, the term he coined, he says happens much more efficiently and effectively in starvation. What he really meant was in the absence of having to process food, the body can put much more energy into cleansing and healing. It's not starving. It's simply not eating.
Beautiful.
Two very
Beautiful.
different things. Yeah.
Okay. We're down to 2 more questions. Thank you for hanging in here with us so much, Loren. This has been
Sure.
so juicy
All right.
today.
I love doing this. It's, it's my favorite thing in the world is to share this information with people.
We so appreciate it. So one question someone asked is, let me see if I want to say this correctly. Is there any cure for seborrheic dermatitis?
Yeah. Seborrheic, I mean, listen, there are very few things. Is there a cure? Let me back up. As I said earlier, if you missed it, only the organism can heal the organism. So seborrheic dermatitis is a skin condition, and the body can heal virtually every skin condition if it has the right conditions. How do we do that? We fast long enough and properly, because fasting allows the body to eliminate the garbage in the body, which is in virtually every case causing the skin condition. Skin conditions like this are a reflection of something happening deep inside the organism. Okay, it's not about putting something on the skin. That's not affecting the underlying cause. We have to actually address the underlying cause, which we don't even have to know what it is. We just have to give the body the chance to deal with whatever's going on by fasting long enough and properly. There are very few conditions the body can't heal when it has the right conditions and opportunity.
That's beautiful. We didn't touch on coconut water. Is that something that you guys drink? Is it something you serve at Tanglewood? Is it something that you find beneficial for us?
Yeah, coconut water is amazing. Unfortunately, for many people listening here today, as soon as you take the outside husk off the coconut, it's no longer impervious to airflow. And that means that the relatively high-fat coconut will go rancid. So young Thai coconuts, or any way of getting coconut water where it's removed from the original package and put in some other package, I wouldn't recommend consuming. Okay. If you can buy whole fresh coconuts, they'll last quite a long time as long as the outside green or yellow husk is intact. But you go into Trader Joe's and you find the brown fuzzy coconut, that's inside the coconut. That's just the inside part. Unfortunately, those are going to be rancid. I wouldn't consume those.
Perfect. Just before we talk about refeeding, whether it's a 1 day or 3 day or 7 day, just one more time, if you would loop around as we're wrapping up here, what you consider the optimal diet, and about just, again, leaning in and trusting the body, because people obviously want to know. We've been told, if we take this product, that'll help you poop out mucoid plaque. Just more about, like you said, trusting the body's wisdom. It takes as long as it takes, that type of thing. If you could just loop back around with that would be great.
What's ideal?
Yes. What's ideal to eat. And then about the elimination process, like you said earlier, we've got years and years and pounds of stuff in there.
That's
and
right.
Then we'll talk about refeeding.
Yeah. So again, if we look at what our digestive tracts are set up, they're almost identical to those of the chimps and bonobos, who live almost exclusively on fruit when sufficient fruit is available. They are forced at the rainiest times of the year to eat other things. Those other things, in their case, might include small amounts of concentrated protein, like other primates. It often includes leaves and pith and maybe some roots and shoots, because there isn't enough fruit available. But we're meant to live on primarily fruit. We get almost all of our body's needs met with fruit and soft, tender leaves. I know people are often concerned about blood sugar. The fact is that almost all fresh fruits have a low glycemic load. And what that means is they have very little impact on blood sugar, because they're loaded with fiber and water, which slows down the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream. Okay. Dried fruits are horrible for the body's blood sugar. Juices are, because you take the fiber out, they have 3 to 4 times the glycemic load. This is not the way. The way is to eat mono meals, one type of fruit at a time. Focus on high water content fruits most of the time, because most people are already dehydrated and so need that water from that perfect food. And consider, watermelon's 92% water. A banana is 75% water. 73 to 74% water. And let's say grape is about 82% water. So there's a big difference. 73, 82 and 92. Well, some people would say, yeah, but it's only a few extra points, 10 more points from the grape to the watermelon. Well, stool is about 75% water. So I'm going to look at this simplistically just to keep it easy. If we eat grapes, 75% of the stool is water. It means most of the water in the grape, let's call it 75% of that water, is leaving the body again. Only about 7 points is actually available to the body. 17 points available in the watermelon. Okay. And so someone asked earlier, why am I recommending watermelon pie if they're not high in minerals? We don't have to worry about the nutrient content so much. The most important thing is actually the water content. Hydration is the single most important metric, in my opinion. Nothing more important than that. Okay. And so by focusing, especially when dehydrated, which is where most people are, by focusing on high water content foods, we can dramatically shift our health reality by getting the body hydrated. Okay. Once hydrated, it's perfectly okay to include other things from time to time, other fruits that aren't so high. But we want to focus, and not exclusively. You can eat bananas while you're hydrating the body, but not very often because they're not helping. Bananas actually contain less water than stool, which means they might actually slightly dehydrate you a little bit. Okay, where watermelons, you don't get thirsty eating watermelon. You might get thirsty eating bananas. Aside from the fruit, we should be eating soft, tender leaves. So any kind of lettuce is fine. Keep salads simple. If you want to eat salads, you can eat a green salad, lettuce, tomato, cucumber, a little bit of avocado. Keep it to 4 or 5 ingredients. Ideally, the simpler it is, the easier we can digest it. You can also eat lettuce with any fruit except melons. So if you don't want to make a salad or don't like eating salads, you can take a banana and wrap it in a lettuce leaf. You can eat lettuce with mangoes and papayas and grapes and apples and oranges and anything except melons. Melons should be eaten by themselves. Okay. In terms of elimination, until we fast, frankly, the old stuff probably isn't going to leave the body, no matter how long you eat perfectly. Most people aren't going to get this stuff out. After fasting, most people are going to start eliminating, depending on let's talk about the 21-day fast or longer that we typically do at Tanglewood. For most people, starting on around day 4 of refeeding, we expect them to be eliminating old, hard material. And it's obvious to these people, as I said before, people say that it feels like they're eliminating cement or rocks. I mean, the stuff is hard and dry and often somewhat painful, but getting it out is life-changing. And so critically important to hang in there and do what they need to do to move this stuff out. I saw there was an earlier question about enemas and colonics. I think you had responded, Alva, to the group and said, I don't recommend them. I think it's important to understand why that is. I made a general statement that manipulating the body creates unintended side effects. With enemas and colonics, what happens is we flush out beneficial bacteria. Our gut biome is roughly 10 trillion bacteria, 3 pounds. It's called the second brain. It weighs as much as the first brain. It produces all the B vitamins every day. And when we do enemas and colonics, we flush it out of the colon. We flush these bacteria out. We don't want to do that. Okay. We alter the pH of the colon. We don't want to do that. And we weaken the bowel muscle. So there's studies now that show that people who use colon hydrotherapy wind up with poorer bowel function. Okay, I don't recommend them because they don't work. The old stuff's not in the colon, and that's all the colonic or enema can affect is the colon, not the small intestine, because there's a valve that prevents water from moving further backwards. So they're not actually doing much because that's not where the material is anyway, and there's all kinds of harm that comes from doing these things. Okay, so we don't need to worry about this. What we need to do is simply support the body by continuing to make the best choices, and we will eliminate this stuff, assuming that we fasted properly, assuming we did what we needed to do. It's this morning I got a message from a guy, an email from someone who said, I've been corresponding with you. He said, listen, he said, I'm the type of person I realized I need to do this my own way. If someone is telling me what to do, I feel like I'm being controlled. I can't do that. So I'd like to come to Tanglewood, but I want to fast my way. And I'm not going to really take direction, but I want you to be there just in case I have a problem. Then I'll trust you. I said, I'm sorry, we won't take you on that basis. If you're not coachable, then you're going to put yourself in danger and put us in some danger as well. I'm only willing to work with people that are open and coachable. It's really important to understand what your own limitations are. If you've never done a long fast, that's okay. But I've taken more than 10,000 people through this process and done it in my own body 4 dozen times. So maybe it would be useful to take some advice from someone who really understands the process.
Beautiful, beautiful. So before Frederick's going to ask you the last question, before we do that, one, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for your generosity and all of the wisdom that you shared with us. I also want to say that for people who might have missed it at the top, Loren's information now, we can find him on Instagram, and we'll post all of that stuff like we always do later. He's got thousands of videos on his YouTube channel that is, so much of it is still just as relevant as everything he said here today. We can go back and do that. If you have questions, you can post them in the chat and I'll do the best to recap anything that he's already said. But maybe you want to watch the video a couple times because he gave us a lot of great information via his own personal story. And for those who are already adopting a raw vegan lifestyle or juicing and into smoothies and stuff, that while that's not what he is into, he did say, he said it repeatedly about the hydrating diet. The more hydrating our diet is, the easier that is on the body, which will also make our fasting experiences easier. And Loren said, not that, so we don't walk away from the call like you have to go to Tanglewood. That's not what he's saying. He's saying if you do anything over 7 days, which you're right, there is a lot of scientific and a lot of books out there that say if you do anything over that, then it is helpful to do coaching. And I know that Loren not only has the facility, but he also has an online coaching program. And so we'll get you those details as well. And you also have a program, please forgive me if I say this incorrectly, but I'm pretty sure it's called Creating Your Perfect Health or something like that, right? That people can.
I've got a couple other resources available. One is called the Creating Perfect Health System. It's available on our website. I'll tell you, it might be fun if you go look at it because you might not recognize me. We created that program about 25 years ago. Virtually every single thing I said in there is still true. I mean, the truth doesn't change. I've been teaching the same thing. There's one piece that's a little bit different now, but that's it. And we still get great reviews on the program, even though the material is older. The recordings are older, but it's about 16 hours of live lectures and seminars, some written material. There's some video and some audio. It's all digital download now. It's $295. We unconditionally guarantee the program. I also started something a couple of years ago called the Academy for Vibrant Living, and we have a much bigger program. It's about $2,500, I think, if I remember correctly. And I've had somebody else running it, but I created all the content. And we have a program called Perfect Health. And then we have a health coach program. And if you're interested in becoming a health coach, you get a certification when you're done from an outside agency. And you have to take the first course to be able to take the second one. There are places, if you want to become a health coach, you can pay someone money and in 2 months you can be a health coach, but you won't necessarily know very much. For me, if someone's going to be a health coach, they first have to know how to take their own health to an amazing new level.
Yeah, thank you. Frederick's going to pop on and ask our last question because somebody asked one in the YouTube. He's been doing this live on YouTube, and so we'd like to take their question. So Frederick, if you'd pop on, I'll mute myself.
Yeah, I'm here. So we have Jerome Shaw said, shout out to the Tagwood Wellness Center. This is a person, hey, Loren, great seeing you again. I think he's been with you some time. And there's another person who calls himself or herself God's child, has 2 questions. Hey, Loren, I want to know of the importance of digital minimalism and isolation during a fast. And what is the least body weight before one can commence a fast? Thank you.
Okay. So the first question about digital minimalism, unfortunately, many people now depend on being connected. And we have a lot of people that come to fast with us who are self-employed or, have a business of some kind. Maybe they have a job, but they also run their own business and they need to be connected. And so, what I say to everyone is, look, sitting in front of a computer screen isn't particularly good for you, and it's not really restful. So if you need to speak to your company, someone, someone, whether it's your boss or someone who works for you, if you need to have a conversation like that once or twice a week, and do whatever you need to do so you don't destroy everything while you're taking care of your health. You don't want to destroy your business and your livelihood, right? So you do what you need to do. If you have family members or somebody you feel like you need to be connected to, okay, that's okay. We have people that talk to their spouse every day for 10 minutes. That's fine. What I would say is, don't waste your energy and time on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or anything else while you're fasting. Okay, that's a waste of energy, and the whole point is to conserve as much energy as you can so your body can use it to cleanse and heal. Doing anything you don't need to do, that's not helping you. That's just taking energy away from those important processes. But whatever you need to do to be okay, do that. Take care of those things, and then close the laptop and turn it off, get away from it, leave it alone, whatever. I mean, there are people who fast and they watch videos all day. They're not getting a fraction as much benefit as they could because they're wasting a lot of energy. And there are people who frankly are unwilling to stay present because they're trying to distract themselves from the emotions that are inevitably going to bubble up to the surface as soon as they get quiet and still enough. But doing that's not helping themselves. Okay, it's not very useful to do that. So I would say don't do that. Okay, the second question was about is there a minimum weight someone needs to be able to fast? Unfortunately, that's a question that's impossible to answer. And the reason it's impossible to answer is because, well, what if someone is 4'2"? Their minimum weight is going to be quite different than someone who's 7'2". Okay, there isn't a minimum weight per se. It really depends on what someone looks like and where they are. And I mean, there are a number of things we take into account, but I can tell you that we fast people who are underweight all the time. And many people who are underweight can't gain weight, okay, because their body doesn't work very well. And so we fast them, they're able to gain weight. And there's a naturopathic doctor. We've done videos with her. She just fasted with me for the third time and is continuing to post about how she feels and functions better than she ever has before. When she came to me for the first time a couple of years ago, she is 5'6" or 170 centimeters, and she weighed 85 pounds or 36 or 38 kilos, something like that. Pretty lean. Okay, we fasted a guy 2 years ago this month who was 6 feet tall or 182 and weighed 46 kilos or 101 pounds. Okay, very, very lean. I'm 150 pounds and people tell me I'm lean, same height. Okay, I weigh 50% more than he did when he started his fast. He was fine. These people were fine. They were able to complete their fast. Now, again, this isn't something you'd want to do without having experienced guidance, but being very lean doesn't necessarily mean that someone can't fast. It's really important that they do it correctly and that they understand what to expect. But often we'll see people who are very, very lean because their body isn't able to gain weight, okay, because they're not digesting, absorbing, or assimilating properly. We can resolve those issues by fasting. Of course, they're going to lose weight. The thing is, they lose much less weight than the average person does, okay, when they're very lean to start with. So, they might lose 30, 40, 50% as much as the average person does. On the other hand, we have people who are morbidly obese. They're going to lose much more weight than the average person does. And when the underweight person begins refeeding, they start gaining weight usually. When the overweight person begins refeeding, they continue losing weight. It's an amazing thing. The body's incredible.
And the beautiful thing too is I know that by email, and again, we'll provide his contact details. Loren does do consultations. So like you said, like there are some things he can't answer because they're specific to that individual. And as you were talking, I realized one thing we didn't really talk about is during detoxification, be it eating the optimal diet or water fasting on our own, cravings and emotional detox. Do you think you could wrap that up in just a couple of minutes and we close there?
Well, the cravings issue is an interesting one because as we're detoxifying, as we are dumping toxins into the bloodstream, and let's say toxins from stuff that we ate 20 years ago, we're very likely to crave those substances. And so it's common for people to have persistent thoughts about food. It's common for people to have food dreams. They wake up and they dream they were eating something. They don't even eat anymore. These are common. It can happen after the fast as well. And then it's really important for people to be completely clear. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm committed to. And I'm going to, we encourage people, everyone, to follow a specific program for at least 6 weeks after completing the process. Because as I said before, it can take your body 4 to 6 weeks to finish getting the garbage out of the bloodstream, and often much longer than that to finish getting the stuff out of the colon. And so if someone doesn't eat as close to optimally as possible for at least 6 weeks, they're not even going to know what they've accomplished. They're not even going to see half the benefit that they've already created for themselves, because it can take that long for it to show up. So, cravings are something that are going to come up. The emotional piece can be very challenging for many people. Honestly, we will have people who aren't very emotionally mature that are going to find it really challenging, because they've done everything their entire lives to try to avoid experiencing their emotions. And here they're going to come face to face with these emotions. Now, it's the single most beneficial thing they could do, is simply to be willing to feel those emotions so that they can experience them and then let them go. They'll dissipate of their own accord if we're simply willing to experience them completely. When we continue to keep them suppressed, they actually become toxic to us and create disease. So I think it's one of the most important things we can do, even though it may be the hardest thing for some people.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Loren, what a wealth of knowledge and experience, hope, and inspiration you are. Thank you so much for taking this time out of your vacation to be with us.
You are very welcome.
Sure, we'll probably ask you back again.
I'll be glad to do it.
I'm sure there'll be a million questions after your visit.
I can imagine.
Just thank you again. And I'll reach out to you later and make sure I have all your contact details, and we'll get that to this weekend. And we'll also provide you with, a copy of your recording as well. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye.